Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this press conference. I'm State Representative Renitta Shannon. I represent House District 84, and I'm here today with activists, community activists, as well as other elected officials to express support for the full accountability in the sentencing of Officer Robert Alston for the death of veteran Anthony Hill. Anthony Hill should be alive today, and he would be if it had not been for the actions of Officer Robert Alston. Officer Olson was a police officer in DeKalb County who shot and killed naked, suffering from PTSD veteran Anthony Hill. A life has been stolen from the Hill family, and that's why it's so important to speak out about these issues. You know that I've talked a lot about police accountability and the need for changes in law to better create a balance between protecting the community as well as ensuring the safety of officers. In this situation, we see that Officer Olson clearly saw Anthony Hill as more of a threat than he actually was. A life has been stolen here. Anthony Hill was a veteran who served this country, who was suffering from PTSD and was walking around naked in an apartment complex when Officer Olson decided to use lethal force and in order to stop him from doing that. And so we understand that Officer Olson has been acquitted of murder, but he was found guilty of aggravated assault. And we understand that juries across the country are not acquitting officers because they haven't done anything wrong. They're acquitting them because the laws basically state that officers can use any level of force that they choose as long as they feel like their life is in danger. And that is wrong. And so again, we are here to express full support for the full accountability through sentencing of Officer Robert Alston in the shooting of veteran Anthony Hill. And next we'll have community activist Gerald Griggs.
Thank you, Representative Shannon, and all of the elected individuals who are here who thought it not robbery to stand with the family of Anthony Hill. We witnessed the trial for 6 days and 6 days of deliberation, and ultimately the jury returned a verdict of guilty on aggravated assault, guilty on violation of oath of office, and guilty of false statements. And it's time as a community to send a swift and strong message to all law enforcement through this case. Officer Olson has to be held accountable for killing an unarmed individual that was in mental health crisis. We understand that the jury acquitted him of the felony murder counts, but they convicted him of the aggravated assault. So we are calling on behalf of him, his family, and the entire community for a maximum sentence in this case. We want 35 years to send a swift and powerful message of police accountability throughout the state and across the nation. We hope that individuals will see that it's time to heal the divide with the community and law enforcement by providing accountability in cases like this. And so that's why we at the NAACP and other civil rights organizations, other social justice organizations have been on the forefront of this movement. Activists stayed up all night 4 years ago for an indictment. They stayed at the trial all 6 days and then 6 days after that to make sure there's accountability, and they will be there for the sentencing. So we're calling on the judge to render a sentence that speaks for the community. This is the only way to bring the community back together is for accountability in this case. And so I'm honored to be standing shoulder to shoulder with these elected officials who are standing with Anthony's family. I'd also like to bring up an activist who has been on the front lines of this for a long time, who is representing the Alliance for Black Lives. I'd like to bring Keisha Braswell to have a few words.
I want to say thank you to the elected officials as well as to all of the activists. I am with Alliance for Black Lives, and as with everyone else here today, we do also feel that 35 years, the maximum sentence, is what is needed in this case. Aggravated assault can range from something as small as a fight. In this case, it resulted in the loss of a life that served the country. And when he needed help, the people that was sworn to serve and protect him ended his life. And so in this case, we do request and believe that 35 years is what is needed. That's what justice looks like in the case of Anthony Hill. In addition to that, we want to say that Anthony Hill was suffering from mental illness, just as many others throughout this country. In the state of Georgia, if you have a loved one that is suffering from mental illness and it is a non-emergency, they're not in danger, no one is endangered, do not call 911. There is a Georgia Crisis Access Line where there are trained professionals that will come out and help you with your loved one for mental illness. That number is 1-800-715-4225. Please lock it in your phones. Again, if it is a non-emergency and you have someone in your family or a loved one suffering from a mental health issue, we don't want a repeat of Anthony Hill. We do not want a repeat of Shali Tilson. Please call the Georgia Crisis Access Line. That number again is 1-800-715-4225. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Sandra G. Scott, District 76, and I am a veteran. What I'm asking is that the police officer and all police officers to have training on how to handle people with mental health issues. They need training. PTSD is something that the police officers should be aware of. Anthony Hill was not an isolated incident. We have had soldiers as well as people with mental health issues being killed for no other reason than just mental illness cases. And we need for police officers to be trained properly on dealing with people that have mental health issues. And Anthony Hill, he did not have a weapon. He did not have anything. He was just naked running around an apartment complex. It should have never happened. And the police officer need to be held accountable. And I would say that they all need training on dealing with mental health issues. Thank you.
And so finally, to close, at the heart of the issue is this. I firmly believe that police officers are operating differently when they are in Black and brown communities, and they operate differently when they see Black and brown skin. And I believe that because all across the country, we have seen young white men shoot up schools, movie theaters, and all kinds of places, and they are successfully taken in without incident. But we see over and over, the flip side is that too often when police officers encounter Black and brown folks, their life is just completely wasted. And that is, how I feel about this situation. That is what we see in this case. You are not going to convince me that a naked person was such a threat that fatal force had to be used. What was the reason that Officer Olson felt that it was just better to waste Anthony Hill's life? And so when you think about it, this case is just so important because you think about the time that it takes to have a baby, raise a child, the resources that every family puts into raising their children to be successful adults as Anthony Hill was, and then just to see that life wasted by police. It is over and over that we see this across the country, and the time is up for us to act on this issue. And so we want full accountability for the shooting of Anthony Hill. A life has been taken, and I'll take any questions.
Does this case really illustrate how difficult it is to get a conviction of a police officer in Georgia? You had a very sympathetic witness. You had a police officer testify against the officer in this case. A lot of elements that would, and you were in DeKalb County, which you had, racial makeup and all that was favorable. Yet there was no conviction. Is that just sort of a troubling sort of indication of how difficult it will be to ever get
Absolutely. Well, I think absolutely, because number one, I think people fail to realize how far away from justice we are. As I mentioned before, the laws and the Supreme Court, so the laws are bad on this issue, as well as the Supreme Court has codified at least twice in the last 20 years that police officers can use any amount of force that they deem necessary as long as they feel like their life is in danger. So that right there creates a situation where it's really tough to get justice. The second thing is that I say that we are so far away from justice because, as you mentioned, Anthony Hill is a veteran, which brings additional sympathy for his case. But what about what about Black and brown folks who have been shot and killed who are not veterans? In addition, a lot of times in these cases, we see that people are unarmed. A lot of these states, people have the right to carry guns. So we are just imagine if Anthony Hill had not been a veteran, and imagine if he had been legally armed. This case probably would not even make the news. And so, absolutely, I think that this case, to me, best illustrates what I have said and what activists have said for so long, which is that when police officers see Black and brown bodies, they make different choices. They make different choices in our community, and they make different choices in these situations. And it's really evident, as I mentioned before, when you see them take in young white men who have killed lots of people. When police show up to the scene, these folks are taken in without incident, and sometimes they're given a meal on the way to jail.
Can I answer that question?
Sure.
Well, and so I think that this case further illustrates how activism has engaged this situation. They had to stay up all night to get an indictment. They had to stay there every single day for 12 days to make sure there was a conviction. And I think the conviction on the aggravated assault speaks volumes. I think that because it's a 1 to 20 year penalty, and then the additional 15 years can send a strong message. So I do agree that it is difficult to convict an officer of murder, but we are seeing the tide change. And I agree with Representative Shannon. Laws need to change. Supreme Court precedent needs to change, because right now what's insulating law enforcement is the law. It's not the people. I got a chance to speak to jurors in the case, and I understand exactly what happened. And what happened was the law did not function appropriately for justice. So what I'm calling for, not only for Anthony's family a maximum sentence, but the implementation of Obama's 21st century policing initiative, which is the solution. It deals with the issue of police training. It deals with the issue of mental health and health screenings for law enforcement, and new technology to be implemented to have de-escalation tactics. And it's time for states to stand up and speak in one voice that every single member of our community are important. Anthony Hill's life was important. And so for numerous members of the jury, they said that the law was inadequate. So we need to change the law. It's not the people that are preventing the convictions, it's the law. And so we need to change the law, and I think that's what we're going to see because of this case and many other cases.
Gerald, I have a question for you. When it comes to sentencing, the judge is going to look at sentencing guidelines, right?
Somewhat. Georgia really doesn't have firm sentencing guidelines, so she has a range of between probation to a maximum sentence of 35 years.
And how do you think, what factors do you think the law is going to be on the side of justice for the sentencing? And that's what the hope is, I know, but will it come out that way, do you think, with the way the law is?
I think the people are going to come out on the side of justice. It's not every day that you see elected officials and activists and family members standing together, sending a message to an elected official. She was elected to do the will of DeKalb County. And I think DeKalb County has spoken in one voice, even the jurors. They convicted him of shooting Anthony Hill and lying about it. So regardless of his past service as a police officer, it's time for justice. I've been in many courtrooms, and I've been told by judges when I was begging for mercy, this is not a court of mercy. This is a court of law, and it's time for the law to apply equally. Yes, my heart goes out to his family, but my heart bleeds for Anthony Hill's family, and he's never coming home. And so the proper punishment for taking a life in Georgia is a life sentence, where in Georgia, a life sentence is 30 years until parole. So she has an opportunity to send a message to give him 30 years plus 5, so he can sit and reflect for the rest of his life the decision he made. Instead of staying in his car instead of using his aspartame, instead of using his OC spray, instead of using his radio, within 7 seconds of seeing an individual who believed the police were his friends, he fired 2 kill shots. The proper punishment for that, and I've heard it many times, is a life sentence, which in this case would be 35 years.
And I would add also that today, we are asking for justice and accountability through the sentencing, but ultimately what we want to see is that police officers will not be so quick to move to using fatal force when they encounter Black and brown folks. And so that is what we are ultimately asking for. And that's why I bring up the time and the resources that it takes for Black families to have babies and grow these folks into successful adults, just to see life wasted by police and you feel like there's nothing you can do about it it's heartbreaking. Other questions?
What about the vigil next week too, leading up to the sentencing? There's a big support to get a lot of people to come out too. Also sent a message the day before sentencing.
Yes, and so Attorney Griggs is correct. The community has really made the difference in this with the numerous activities that they've done. I remember before being elected in 2014 when a group of activists, and I was included in that group, camped out in front of the Decatur courthouse to force accountability for this officer to get him indicted. So this has been a long track for activists and folks who are concerned about this issue to make sure that everyone understands the community is watching and we want justice. I'll let Keisha or Representative Griggs talk to you more about the list of activities that are planned for the community so that folks can come out and show their support, because that is important.
I will speak to on this coming Wednesday on the 30th of October, March for Our Lives as well as Alliance for Black Lives will have a die-in outside of the courthouse. The students wanted to participate because one of their main issues is gun violence. And when citizens are unarmed and are killed by officers with guns, that is still gun violence. So in support of our veteran Anthony Hill, our hero, March for Our Lives and Alliance for Black Lives will also be having a die-in outside of the courthouse to send a message to the judge that we do want justice in this case of Anthony Hill. We are watching, and we do want a 35-year sentence. I'll have Griggs come up and speak a little bit more about the vigil that's planned on the 31st.
And so on the 31st, in partnership with the Alliance for Black Lives and numerous other entities, the NAACP, both the Georgia and the DeKalb County branches, will have a vigil the night before. It will start at 5:30 right outside the courthouse. We're calling on ministers. We're calling on community members. We're calling on churches. We're calling on everybody that's concerned with the issue of mental health and police accountability to come out. We're specifically asking for the mega churches in DeKalb to step up. This is an issue that's important to all of the individuals involved. We want to support Anthony's family, so we're calling on all of the veterans organizations and veterans to come to the DeKalb County Courthouse on October the 31st at 5:30 for a prayer vigil and rally for justice for Anthony Hill. Again, it will be put on by the DeKalb County branch of the NAACP in partnership with the Georgia NAACP. So that will be one action. We will support the March for Our Lives die-in. And then November the 1st, we are asking for all people concerned to come down for the sentencing of Anthony Hill at 9 o'clock in Judge Deere's courtroom. We're asking for a peaceful, nonviolent, but focused arrival of the community. We know the courtroom is small, so we want to set aside a partition for the family, but we want all of the community to have their eyes on this case to make sure that there's justice for Anthony Hill. So those are the activities that we have planned.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for coming out today. Before we leave, I want to recognize the other elected officials that are standing here with us today. We have Representative B. Wynn, who's also out of DeKalb County, and Representative El Mahadi, who is in the Stockbridge area. So thank you so much. Thank you again.